And Michael has a really fun first hour, and I teased at the end of it, geography lessons are coming to America in college football. And long ago, I mean, Michael, this is, the Pandora's box has been way opened in college football.
Right.
I don't know exactly where we're going, but with the news yesterday, I think was a shock to many in the West Coast to hear that the Pac-12, at least soon, will be the Pac-10 again with USC and UCLA 1 foot out the door. They're going to the Big Ten. So I saw all the jokes on social media, like wait for those, West Coast games between Maryland and UCLA, like the start times on the East Coast. It's chaos right now in college football when it comes to geography. First of all, what do you make of it in general? And again, we talked about it with the NBA and Kevin Durant, free agency, and demanding trades. And the other thing, is it good for college football to have this wild, wild west, pun intended here, where teams can just say, you know what, we're going to make these super conferences and the geography be damned. We're going to go where the money is.
Well, I think as the great Johnny Sack from The Sopranos said, it's always about the money. Again with the money? Yes, again with the money. And it is the money. I mean, look, the Pac-12 Network was a disaster. And in fairness to UCLA, in fairness to USC, in fairness to Washington and Oregon and Arizona State, they didn't reap the benefits of a good TV deal. I mean, Jack Johnson, our friend down in Biloxi, Mississippi, he doesn't even show the Pac-12 Network in his book. Think about that, David. I mean, they've done a horrible job of enhancing their money. I mean, what Texas did with their Longhorn Network increased their value of their franchise. I mean, and the Pac-12 has all these great entities within them at different times, understanding. However, that being said, there's a lot of good product on the West Coast, Utah teams. I mean, but because they didn't market it correctly, nobody was buying the Big 12 network, unfortunately, unless you lived, in Western time zones. So I think this is a byproduct of that. I think that's A. B, I think that once Nebraska joined, and once Oklahoma and once Texas moved, all the barriers have been broken. I mean, you can't get any further west than the Big 12 in the Big 10 than Nebraska, but now we did. And airplane travel is no longer going to be a problem. So I think what we're going to see. Now, I think there's a lot of elements in play here. I think if you're Gonzaga, right? If you're Gonzaga, don't you want to join the Pac-12 in basketball to increase your level of play so you're ready for the tournament? I think I would do that, right? I think I would do that. We're going to play we're going to join the Pac-12 just for that. Oregon and Washington are major properties. They're major brands. They're incredible brands. They're going somewhere. If they're staying in the Pac-12, who's coming in? Is Boise State coming in? You've just lost the Los Angeles market.
Yes.
Putting San Diego State in isn't going to do anything. Sure, it gives you San Diego, but nobody goes to their games anyway. Now, they're building a brand new stadium on campus, and maybe they will. There was one time the Chargers played in that stadium in the old AFL that was on campus there. So there's a lot moving parts here. And I just think it is. But the money is too great. The money is too great.
Well, it's a great
Again
quote.
With the money.
You're nailing it because that's exactly what it's always about. People can tell you it's about other things and whatever, education. It's about the money with these power conferences for sure. By the way, Carl Johnson's going to join us tomorrow here on the Lombardi Line. Can't wait to catch up with Carl and see what he's cooking down there, down south. But, Michael, I think the other shoe to drop eventually, doesn't it have to be Notre Dame? Like, you talk about Gonzaga in college basketball, it's a great parallel. Like, do they need to get into the Pac-12, at least for them to get them ready? I mean, we know that they're a perennial powerhouse already. Does Notre Dame eventually need conference affiliation when they see the realignment that's going to happen here with the two elite teams? No, they can just stay independent?
David, they got the NBC deal. They have their own network. I mean, they have their own network. They don't have to share that revenue with anybody. I mean, why they're in the ACC in basketball for a reason. Why are they in the ACC for basketball? For the same reasons why Gonzaga should be in the Pac-12 for basketball, to enhance their ability to play in the tournament. But to share their wealth in college football would be a mistake. Now, BYU's a team that should go in the Pac-12. They're a lost item. They don't have anything, and Utah BYU playing every year in a big Pac-12 game might be good. I mean, there's a way to solve the problem in the Pac-12, but I don't see it being Notre Dame coming into the Pac-12. They're not going to share their revenue. but you've got to find some way to market it and improve it.
If you want to see a grown man cry, just watch me watch Requiem for a League, the 30 for 30 in the Big East on basketball in the 80s, which was my childhood, Michael. And what I loved about what Dave Gavitt and company did back then was they basically said, we're going to make a basketball league only, the Big East, back in the 80s. And it's yes, they're going to get revenue, but it's not about football. It's about basketball. And that league was wildly successful. And arguably, to me, the best conference ever. ACC fans are going to get mad at me. Ever in the history of college basketball in the 80s. By the way, they're the only league ever to put 3 of 4 in the Final Four back in 1985. Are we done with that? Is the ideal that model of like, we're really going to try to do something great for Northeast schools in basketball? It's done because geography doesn't matter anymore. And now we're just going to go to these super conferences? Is that where we're ultimately headed?
And if you're Notre Dame, why go in there? Because if you have 2 losses, you can't get in. Notre Dame can sit there with their popularity and their appeal, to the voters. And if they play a softer schedule and they go undefeated, they get in. But if they go into the Big Ten and they lose, 2 games, they're out. They're out. They can't get into the Final Four. Whereas where they're sitting right now, the pathway's there. I mean, think about this, Dave. Dayton was the last team in the final 60. They were the first team out in the 64.
Right.
And why did that happen? It happened because they scheduled to play LaSalle in Philadelphia on the road in a February game. And they lost it. And that loss created negative points in the ranking. Okay? Mm-hmm. Had they beaten LaSalle, it would have given them no points in the ranking. It would have improved their position, not one iota. But by losing, it lost them. So teams have to be careful where they position themselves. I'm saying about Gonzaga is every time I watch Gonzaga every year, forgetting that I got to talk about KenPom, genuflect, please, that you say they're not playoff ready. They haven't had enough. They said, well, we play a great schedule in November. Yeah, but November in college basketball is different than March college basketball. Like, you're not really ready. Yeah, but, Santa Clara was good last year, and so was St. Mary. They're not ready. You're not ready. The last team that got in was UCLA 2 years ago, and UCLA beat them, and they were the last team in. So it's about preparing your team for the championship. I just think Notre Dame sits perfectly where they're positioned, and they can have everybody else fight for them when they don't play. Now they'll play SC because I don't think they'll give that game up because it's popular, and they'll play some other teams, the Michigan States and all that. But they have that sample, which gives them an opportunity to determine their own fate.
We just had Wes Reynolds on, and hopefully everybody got to listen and watch. And Wes was spot on with Pat Perez and Live Golf. And he said, hey, at least Pat Perez is honest about why they're making the move to Live Golf. It's all about the money. You go back to Jim Boeheim when Syracuse had to leave the Big East to go to the ACC. And in my best Jim Boeheim with his, like this, how he does these press conferences. And Boeheim basically just said, we all know why we're leaving. Right? It has nothing to do with basketball. It has everything to do with football. It has everything to do with money. That's what it was. And Boeheim was pissed. He didn't want to leave the Big East, but he had to because the school said, we're going where the money is. So now I look at it, and I look at USC, and I look at Lincoln Riley, okay? When he talks to those kids, Michael, does it make any difference at all to the kids that he's recruiting, whether or not they're in the Pac-12 or if they're in the Big Ten?
Oh, I think it does. And here's why. I think if you're a kid from, like, if I'm at Arizona, right, and now LA's open because all the kids that live in LA that wanted to go to SC and wanted to go to UCLA, they can't see the road games. It's harder to see the road games. It's hard to go watch your son. One of the things in Florida, why does Central Florida is able to get so many good kids to stay there? Because the parents want to watch their kids play week after week. They want to drive to the game. They want to be able to see the home games and go to some of the road games. Now you're flying, and it's expensive to fly, assuming that you even get there based on the way the airlines are doing with planes now. I mean, you could have your plane canceled in a minute. So, I do think there's some of that. Now, a lot of kids grow up in the Los Angeles area. They want to play at USC or they want to play at UCLA. They're not giving that up. But it gives Oregon and Washington a chance, or Arizona and Arizona State, to get back into LA and reclaim some territory, because you could say to mom and dad, look, you're going to be able to see every one of his games. We're going to be at Oregon. That's a train ride. We're Washington. You can get there. Utah's a quick flight. We're really close to a lot of these schools.
It's just going to be bizarre because, again, the other shoe that we don't talk about it enough, and you did bring it up, which I think is a salient point, the basketball connotation to it, like Ohio State against UCLA at Pauley Pavilion. Are you guys ready for that? I mean, like, it's going to be exciting. We're going to watch it. There are new rivalries, I guess, that can be born from it, like we're seeing, in the ACC schools that came in, or the Big East schools that came into the ACC, like a Syracuse. But it's just weird, Michael. It's so awkward to get used to this realignment in college football, which then, of course, changes college basketball because of these perennial powerhouses like a UCLA that are now going to play in the Big Ten. I mean, 2024 is going to be not only weird in college football, but it's going to be very awkward in college basketball as well.
Well, I mean, we're in an awkward world. I mean, nothing's normal anymore, right? There's nothing normal, and we just got to get used to it, and we're going to have to figure. I mean, USC Michigan in October is now going to become a game.
And it might
fun,
be awesome.
Right?
It could be awesome to see USC in the Big House.
Let's face it. No, but look at Riley when he left Norman. He left to go to the Pac-12 for an easier pathway than going into the Southeast Conference. Now all of a sudden he's in the Big Ten. Oh, wait a minute.